Are you someone that's been trying to grow your hair and have it grow thicker and longer? Well, let me share with you what I have been doing, and I have been seeing a huge difference in my hair. So I have been consuming every single morning collagen powder from Primal Kitchen. I get the chocolate. I also have tried vanilla, and they're both so yummy. There's a ton of other flavors too, but I love chocolate. So every morning I put together some hemp milk, a couple of scoops of the collagen powder. Sometimes I throw in some organic fruit in there. And that's it. That's my breakfast. And my hair has been growing, honestly, almost a little out of control. It's growing so fast. So if you want to check it out, check out the collagen powders. They're amazing and they just taste so good. Head over to Primal Kitchen, PrimalKitchen.com and put in the code MargaretR10 for 10% off of any collagen powder or actually anything on their website. Trust me, you're going to love how fast your hair grows. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. You are listening to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and today we have a new guest, Victor Briere. He's an Ayurvedic doctor and co-founder of the International Institute of Ayurveda. And today we are talking all about the vagus nerve. And many of you may not know about the vagus nerve, but it is one of the most important aspects to your health. Honestly, because when that is not functioning correctly, you may be having some chronic digestive issues, inflammation, and most likely a history of some kind of trauma. So today we are really diving deep about the vagus nerve, where it is actually in your body, and how you can actually heal it. And it all has to do with dealing with trauma, of course, but there are other ways that you can actually help the vagus nerve along. So join me today with our new guest, Victor, and on to the show. And we are back for another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and this week we have a new guest, Victor Briere, an Ayurvedic doctor, and we're going to be talking about something that you probably don't even know that's in your body. Victor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to our talk.
So I am so interested in what we're going to be talking about today because I think it's something that most people don't really talk about. And I think it's vitally, vitally important. So today we're talking about the vagus nerve. And tell us a little bit about where it is and why is it so important?
Yeah, the vagus nerve is one of those things that we should have learned in elementary school, along with the heart and lungs and liver and all that stuff. Yeah,
right.
We should have played a game where we point to our vagus nerve. And so we can make up for lost time by doing that now. The vagus nerve is the biggest nerve in our body. It is called vagus is Latin for wandering. So it's the wandering nerve, and it got that name because it wanders all throughout the body. It has a point of origin in our brainstem, and it connects to all our sense organs. So eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and all throughout our skin for touch. And then it goes down, connects to our throat, our voice box, and is largely responsible for how we speak. And then you go further down and it connects to every vital organ we have. So heart, lungs, liver, spleen, gallbladder, pancreas, stomach, large intestine, small intestine, you name it, and the reproductive organs. So it's not actually one nerve, it's a big nerve bundle. And what's very special about it in its physiology is most of our nerves are one-way streets. So they send information from one place to the next.
Right.
But the vagus nerve is a two-way street. It's a superhighway, basically, in our body. And it what it allows for is a constant, and I do really mean constant, communication between every organ in our body. So if we break that down for a second and look at what that really means, that means that my stomach is talking to every other organ in my body, including my brain. My brain's talking to every organ in my body. My liver's talking to every organ in my body, and so on and so forth. So, I'm an Ayurvedic doctor, and we always focus on the holistic side of health. And so that's a very holistic nerve. It incorporates the connective aspect of or the synchronistic aspect of our being, as opposed to isolating different parts of our body at any given time and saying, oh, there's something wrong with my fill in the blank.
Okay. That's so amazing that it does this. And I know that I certainly didn't, I wasn't taught this in grammar school, high school, not that I can recall.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's so vitally important and it plays such a huge role in how we perceive the world. Dr. Stephen Porges is a very famous psychiatrist, I believe, who did a lot of research on the vagus nerve and wrote kind of the book of our modern era on the vagus nerve, even though the vagus nerve has been known about for a long time. But he refreshed it. He brought it back into vogue, and he did a lot of research on our perception of the world based on the vagus nerve in terms of threat and safety. So what we need to know about that is that the vagus nerve is part of the autonomic nervous system.
Right.
The autonomic nervous system has two parts, and those are the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The parasympathetic is what we dwell in most of the time, ideally. That's starting to go haywire in our culture.
Yeah.
But ideally we dwell in our parasympathetic nervous system, and that's where we relax, we feel calm, we digest, we reproduce, we do all those kinds of functions. Our breath rate is normal, our heart rate is normal, our blood pressure is normal, so on and so forth. And then we have a defensive system called the sympathetic nervous system that activates when a threat is present. And then our heart rate increases, our breath rate increases, our body deprioritizes digestion, deprioritizes reproduction, and deprioritizes creativity, and prioritizes survival. So that means we think fast, act fast, we become hypervigilant, we become stressed, but not stressed in the bad way, like, ooh, stress is evil, stressed in the good way, like, I need to get out of this situation now.
Right.
Stress, which, as we all know, can often be very helpful if we actually need to get out of a situation. The problem is when we perceive threat and there is no threat. Then we jump into our sympathetic nervous system unnecessarily, and that takes a toll on our biology. And if we have trauma or something like that, which Stephen Porges talks about a lot, we get stuck perceiving threat all over the place. And then we get stuck in our sympathetic nervous system, to say it simply. And the vagus nerve, which is responsible for switching us between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, can't bring us back to a state of calm and relaxation and rejuvenation without great effort. And our body deteriorates more quickly. And we start getting imbalances, and then eventually we wind up with some kind of diagnosis.
Okay. So what would be some symptoms? Like if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, well, how do I know if I have a vagus nerve problem?
So there are a few layers to look at it. Well, we can look at two because we don't have many hours to speak, unfortunately, as fun as that would be. We can look at the one where you literally have damage to the nerve itself. And that can look like a few different things depending on where that damage is, because remember, it goes throughout your entire body. But there are a few early, just kind of off the cusp signs.
Okay.
One is chronic digestive issues, Crohn's, IBS, colitis, stomach, gastritis, things like that. That can't be resolved by just mere dietary changes alone or medication alone.
Okay.
Or I'm an Ayurvedic doctor, so I don't use allopathic medication. I use herbal medication, but
Sure.
You get the idea, right? So that can be a big sign that the nerve is damaged. Another big sign is a constant barrage of inflammation that is completely systemic and can't be pinpointed to a cause. So just generalized inflammation. The reason for that is the vagus nerve has a lot to do with our immune system function. When we enter our sympathetic nervous system, our immune system can go on hyperdrive, and which is okay for temporary periods of time. But when we start experiencing a chronic autoimmune disease or something like that, it can become very not positive for our body and system.
Sure.
So
you're saying,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're saying that the stressor of an autoimmune condition stresses out the vagus nerve?
Other way around. Or you could say it's like a downward spiral. So usually it starts out with the damage to the vagus nerve, triggers an unwarranted immune response, and then that deals damage to tissues that don't need to be affected by the nervous system. So you get immune system. So you get inflammation.
Okay.
And then, of course, that creates stress of its own, right? It's why am I sick? I'm sick. I'm worried. I'm concerned. And then that doubles down and you go into your sympathetic nervous system because of the stress and you perceive a threat that you can't resolve. And then that activates your immune system again. And then over time, you wear out your immune system function.
Okay.
Yeah. So it could go either way. And that's the thing with the vagus nerve is you're always going to hear that. Stuff can go either way. It could either start purely physical and end up psychological, or vice versa. Not that I even believe physical and psychological are actually any different, but
right.
We talk about it that way.
Okay, so the symptoms would be some type of chronic digestive issue which is like the majority of my patients have and like the population as well, and then some type of inflammation, which obviously leads to chronic illness. So, which is a lot of people as well. What else do we see?
Well, so that brings us to the second layer, which is, let's say that your vagus nerve is not literally damaged, but you've experienced a lot of, we'll just say, really rough experiences in your life, very threatening experiences in your life. You create worldviews that are recorded in your body's nervous system, and specifically the vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve trains your body to react in a certain way when you even catch wind of a threat. And so you could have a massive overreaction to a threat that's not even really all that threatening, but your body acts as though it is. And that's all based on the past.
Got it.
So, right. So, and maybe there were a few times where it was really that threatening, but now your body acts as though every time it's that threatening.
Okay.
And, that could be something as simple as you had a bad run-in as a teenager and, got mugged. And that really triggered you and you needed to be in your sympathetic nervous system. So that's understandable. But now every time you walk down the street, someone walks by and their hands in their pocket and you completely go into a freak out or high stress mode. Right.
Sure.
And you can feel that in your body. And that takes a big physiological toll on you. So that can cause inflammation, that alone. Forget what you ate that day. Yeah, absolutely. So your cortisol levels shoot up and the whole 9 yards. So that's all perceptual based, but there may not be anything actually damaged in the nerve itself. It's actually performing its job, but it's based more on we can say mental aspect of it or sensory perception of it. And that's much more common.
Okay. So So my gosh, this is also a lot of people too. I mean, walking around with some type of past trauma. It's very common.
It's almost everybody.
Right. I don't know of anyone that's completely unscathed from anything that's ever happened, from childhood and on. So, trauma can really start in the womb too.
Absolutely.
Generational. So, yeah. All right. So let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, oh my God, I have Crohn's or I have IBS. I've been having it for years. And yeah, I've had trauma. And so is there a way to fix this, or is there a way to sort of adjust it or balance it?
Absolutely. There is so much we can do, and that brings us into the healing aspect of it all. There is rarely, I won't say never, but there's rarely such a thing as a vagus nerve that is so damaged that it cannot recover. Like I said, most of the time we're dealing with the perceptual sensory aspect of the triggers and the memory in the body and the threat management system in the body. That's most of the time what we're going to be dealing with. Unless someone's been in a bad accident or had some kind of situation, it's much rarer that the nerve gets damaged. It's more like it gets weakened by the constant dwelling in the sympathetic nervous system, which is the stress system. And so what we got to do is strengthen it like we would strengthen a muscle, but we do the nervous system version of that. So, and that's where a holistic art like Ayurveda really steps in. Most of Ayurveda is designed because people who practiced Ayurveda thousands of years ago, of course, knew about all this stuff, is designed to help someone enter their parasympathetic nervous system prior to administering healing, with the knowledge that unless someone's relaxed and calm and feels safe, the body is not going to rejuvenate properly.
Sure.
So you could throw whatever herb you want at someone. And sure, it might help. I'm not saying it's not going to do anything. But if you're looking for genuine deep healing, especially of a chronic issue, you can't rely on just medicine of any kind. You're going to need to affect your own nervous system, and you're going to need to consciously basically create a lifestyle that allows you to enter into your parasympathetic nervous system most of the time.
Okay. That may be hard for a lot of people, I think.
And that's why we're seeing epidemics of diseases spike, because our lifestyles are not designed to do that. Our lifestyles are designed to throw us into our sympathetic nervous system for the most part.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Okay. So, all right. So the deep healing requires you to heal the nervous system. So how does one do that?
Well, first go-to is acknowledge that you got this going on in your life to some degree or another, because it might be really bad or you might be not so bad, but to some degree we all struggle with stress. And we need to recognize the effect that has on our physiology.
Sure.
And in our modern era, the vast majority of us suffer from too much stress. Our bodies are really not designed to live in the kind of world that we've created, unfortunately. And so we can get honest about that, and then we can take steps to change it once we've been honest about that. So first go-to is pick up a breathing practice. That's number one. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that, like I said, the vagus nerve is part of the autonomic nervous system.
Right.
Autonomic kind of gives it away. It's all automatic stuff. And so our heart rate, breath rate, all that stuff is largely, we don't have to think about it all day. But we're designed in such a way where we actually have conscious control of our breathing, as well as our breath is controlled by our autonomic nervous system. So there's a bridge there. We can affect the autonomic nervous system through our breath. And so that's why breathing practices are so powerful and so health creating, because they get us into that parasympathetic state where our body will naturally take care of itself pretty well.
Okay. And is there a breathing technique that you really like that's pretty easy?
I would turn to yoga, which has thousands of breathing techniques, but a very basic breathing technique is to take as long of an inhale and exhale as you possibly can, with the exhale being slightly longer than the inhale. But you got to breathe into your abdomen. You have to engage your diaphragm. So on the inhale, your abdomen expands, and on the exhale, your abdomen contracts. That allows for the full movement of the diaphragm, and that gives you a full breath.
Got it. Okay.
And signals your vagus nerve to say, hey, I'm safe, we're good, because I'm lowering my breath rate, and you can relax now, or my body can relax now. It's good to relax. I'm safe to relax.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
And what's the next one?
The next one is to start working with your diet. So the diet's tough because food is not food. Food is our projection of all sorts of things. I go for the alcohol or the coffee or the pizza or the ice cream or whatever. Yeah, sure, it tastes good, but I do it because I'm either feeling a lack of something in my life, or it reminds me of love, basically. I mean, we could get into that and, again, talk about that for hours, but
sure.
Those are the basics, right?
Okay.
So That's why it's so hard. You can't just change your diet. You can't just, grip tight and say, okay, I'm never going to eat that thing I love again. It doesn't work. We cave eventually because it represents so much more to us than food itself.
Okay. Right.
But nevertheless, we have to work at uncovering those layers inside ourselves so that we can change our food habits, because vagus nerve is intimately connected to the gut. And if you create digestive stress, it will manifest as mental stress. So
say that again.
If you create digestive stress, meaning you eat a bunch of stuff that stresses your digestive system out, it's too heavy, it's not healthy, it creates problems, then that will manifest as mental stress.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so eating things that you're really not supposed to be, or you have a gluten allergy, but you have pizza one night.
Right.
And that's creating like all this digestive issues, gas, bloating, maybe even diarrhea. And you're saying that it is in turn manifesting as as stress in your body.
And I'll go two further. The first further I'll say is it meaning like, okay, you eat something that your body has trouble digesting. So your body knows that, and the vagus nerve says, hey, we're in trouble, and sends a message to your brain saying, hey, we're in trouble. You will actually create a problem in your life because you feel anxious and need to pin it on something. Happens all the time. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's why we get hangry, right? That's the joke phrase we use these days as millennials.
Right.
You get hangry, meaning you're hungry, so you're under digestive stress, and there's your autonomic nervous system is crying out for something that it's not getting. And so you get hungry and hungrier, and you get angry, and then before you know it, you're lashing out at someone.
Right.
There you go. You don't need to look any further than that. It happens all the time. Or your digestion's sluggish, and then all of a sudden you feel depressed, and you say, yeah, my life sucks. Well, no, probably not. It's probably just that your digestive system's completely gummed up. And so you feel that feeling of depression, and then your mind applies that to something external.
Oh,
It's projection, right? It's classic. Yeah. And then the other thing is, you mentioned gluten allergy, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we'd say in Ayurveda is, well, why do you have the gluten allergy? What's the problem digesting gluten? And it's like, well, I don't know, I just do. Well, there's a whole story behind that. There's a whole development behind that. That's an imbalance, right? If someone has a gluten allergy, there's a reason that the body can't handle gluten. And we want to get to the bottom of that.
Interesting. Do tell, because I've been gluten-free I have, what about, like, I have 2 genes that say that I'm gluten sensitive.
Yeah, so I do too, but I can digest gluten fine. We have all these genes that activate and deactivate, the common The epigenetic stuff's becoming more available to the public. This whole idea that we're born with genes and they're static was pretty much just misinformation. So our genome changes or expresses differently based on our different behaviors and beliefs. And that's where you get like, that's where we said at the beginning of the show, you can get trauma in the womb, right? Because your genome's affected by the environment that you're in. So you express different genes based off of your external environment. So your genes are not these static things that just sit there and they are what they are. They're constantly shifting and changing their expression. Yeah. So there might be a way to turn those gluten sensitive genes off. For example, they've been turned on for a reason and are expressing for a reason. And it might be because you have some digestive distress that was unresolved and has become chronic. And so heavier foods like gluten, your body can't handle and rejects, and you have an immune response to them. So, but if you could strengthen your digestive power, then you might be able to handle gluten no problem.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard that take on gluten, that it could be somewhat reversible.
Yeah, a lot of allergies can be reversible. I'm not going to go and say all of them can, right? Like someone who has celiac disease, that's much tougher, and likely they will never be able to handle gluten.
Right.
But a lot of the things we see that are just, I was fine until I was 25, and then all of a sudden I couldn't digest gluten anymore. That's a big key indicator that your body's digestive system is under stress, and it's not because of gluten, it's because of all the other things.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we like to point at food and say, you're the problem. If I get rid of you, I'm fine. But we rarely point at ourselves and say, why can't I handle this?
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So all right. So
yeah, we could go down that rabbit hole forever.
all right. So diet, and what would be something else that we can do?
Relationships. Relationships are our biggest triggers we got. We want them so bad, and they drive us crazy so bad at the same time. And they're very safety. It's a high risk game, so to speak. So we look to our relationships for safety and security, which we are wired to do. So don't try and get rid of that.
Right.
You are completely wired to socially engage with your world. So you're never going to erase that. It's completely built into you. And so we look to the world for that. We look to engage other people for safety and security. And so often we don't get it. Or we get signals or cues that we're not safe and we should feel threatened. And that if we don't behave a certain way, we're going to be cast out or abandoned or not loved or so on and so forth. Well, that's going to create a lot of problems in the body. That's going to throw us into our sympathetic nervous system, or give us a general feeling of not safeness unless we stay within very specific parameters. And then we got a different problem. Then we develop diseases of comfort. So let's say, for example, I learn that, okay, if I speak up at the dinner table and I get too excited, then I get told to be quiet and that I'm being disruptive.
Okay.
Just for example.
Right.
And so that happens like 20 times, 30 times, 40 times every day. And I grow up and I realize and I learn, my nervous system learns that I need to tone down my enthusiasm. Otherwise, I'm not safe, right? I get punished. I get cast out. I get isolated. I get cues of anger and, like disappointment and that I'm not worthy and that, I'm a bad person. I get all those cues.
Right.
And so I completely hamper my enthusiasm based on that. And now it's built into me, right? So it becomes part of my identity as I grow up. That's just the way I am. But it's not just the way we are. And what happens is, because I never learned to express enthusiasm because of my little world growing up,
right?
I now as an adult, unless I do something about it, I don't express enthusiasm, and that steals a lot of opportunities that I may otherwise would have had.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. And so now I build a life around that fear. So while I'm sitting in my house and there's no threat present, I feel very comfortable. I'm in my parasympathetic nervous system. But I avoid at all costs expressing enthusiasm and the whole life that represents. So I become too comfortable. I sit around too much. I don't go out. I don't explore. I don't take opportunities. I don't invigorate myself. I don't take risks. So I become obese. That's how it works. And, that's just an example, but we can a million different versions of that.
Okay. I love it. All right. So relationships. Oh boy. What is the other trigger? Or we were talking about how to heal. So breathing was one, diet's another, relationships.
Cultivating loving, compassionate, and accepting relationships. And that does not mean that there's no conflict. It does not mean that. It just means that on the whole, we feel safe with each other. And I'm not talking about just romantic or parents. I'm talking about everybody, the world we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are and then sleep. Sleep's a huge one. And then of course that's tied to all the other ones.
Okay.
And yeah, those are if you could get those down, you're pretty good. You're good off.
So do people who meditate every day, would you say that they really don't have any vagus nerve issues?
On the contrary.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, a lot of people, we say it's meditation, but meditation is a very specific yogic practice that's very intense and not so easily achievable. Sitting down and being quiet, that's good. I'm not trying to say that's bad, but it's not meditation. Meditation is a process of intense focus that ultimately unites the mind with the object of perception and then even liberates itself from that. That's meditation as defined by yoga. And that can take immense amounts of focus and practice to cultivate. And oftentimes people sit down and try and meditate, but they just end up getting more anxious because all their fears come up. They have no one to talk to about it. And they just walk around feeling messed up. So I encourage people, especially at the beginning, to cultivate a breathing practice and an asana practice, meaning postures, prior to trying to truly meditate.
And which yoga posture, would you say are like the top two things?
Oh, completely depends on the person. It wouldn't be fair if I gave a top two. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's not really like, like even restorative yoga in general, would you say like that would put someone into parasympathetic? No?
Yeah, on the whole, yes, especially if you have a good instructor and especially if you're doing it in earnest, that can absolutely bring you to a parasympathetic state. And that's wonderful. But if you go there and you do that and then you rush right back into your crazy life and you don't make any changes there, it's not enough.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So that's where Ayurveda comes in. And that's why Ayurveda is so huge on lifestyle for healing. Because it's saying unless you cultivate a wholesome lifestyle, you're cruising for bad times.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're really, I could see how this is. I mean, first of all, a lot of people may be in not great relationships. They're just like, it's not great, but isn't that what marriage is, type of attitude. And you sort of live in that for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And I just think that if you're living in that stressor, and there's so many people that sort of live like that and not so great relationships, not feeling fulfilled, not feeling heard, not feeling seen. And they may do yoga, like you said, but then they're just coming home to that.
Yeah, and yoga is there. So the meaning of yoga is to yoke yourself to spirit. So how we practice it in the West is, if you walk into a gym and you practice core yoga, that's not yoga. And again, I'm not trying to demean that. It's great. You should have a strong core. And yoga asanas can be great for building a strong core. But that's not what is meant by the yogic practice. The yogic practice is we need to get so in touch with our truth that we end up living that out. And in that way, we connect ourselves to spirit, our spirit, the great spirit, whatever you want to call it. And that is what allows us to dwell in our parasympathetic nervous system most of the time, is that security of that relationship that's not dependent on another person. And then we can really heal and be vibrant and healthy. And if we don't do that, then we're not going to be as healthy as we could have been. And in some cases, if we stray very far from that, we get very, very sick.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So these seem simple, but some of them could be really difficult to unravel.
Extremely difficult. And I don't recommend trying to do it by yourself. I always recommend talking to someone, preferably someone neutral, because it's so hard. I mean, you have to confront some of your deepest fears, like the relationship thing, right? You're married, you've been married, you got a whole life built, you got kids, you got whatever. You can't just walk away from, like, let's be real, right?
Right.
I mean, you could, but, and I'm not even saying you should by any means, but to confront your fear to make change in relationship that might risk your partner saying, I don't want this. That's very scary and can be very stressful in and of itself.
Sure.
So you got to measure that out, but otherwise we end up creating a little bit of a cage for ourselves, and then that's gonna lead to problems in our health. Absolutely. There's a Harvard study that basically, I mean, I'll make the long story short. The conclusion was, and I completely agree based on just my personal experience in the clinic, relationships are the single biggest factor in someone's health profile, period.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I work primarily with women who have chronic illness. Every single one have had some form of trauma. Every single one is having some sort or had some sort of dysfunctional relationship with a friend, family, spouse. I see it all the time, every day.
Oh, absolutely. They go hand in hand. And we as a culture, we really need to wake up to the reality of that. I mean, we really need to sit down and be like, okay, I am going to get a disease because I'm not relating well.
And they will, because it's almost not that they want the disease.
No.
But it's almost as it's so difficult to speak up and to really say what it is that you feel. I just had someone on the podcast today, which will be coming out in a few weeks, about speaking your truth and speaking up and really having beautiful, deep conversations and dialogue with the person that you're in a relationship with. And so many people just don't know how to do that.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're all listening to this, and I'll just raise my hand first to break the ice. I can think of many times in the relationship with my spouse where I was the person not being open. I was being unaccepting. But at the time, I felt completely justified, right? In my point of view. So it's not so clear cut. It's not so easy.
No.
And we like to think of ourselves as, well, but I do want that. But when the time comes, if we get triggered, if we feel threatened by what our partner is saying or doing, do we become the person shutting it down? And I think it's important to look at our role in that as well in our exploration of relationships in the vagus nerve.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Okay, so we talked about what the vagus nerve is, where is it, how it communicates with all of our organs, how it's a two-way street, some of the symptoms, and how we can heal it. And so is there anything else that we're sort of missing, any major aspects that we need to be aware of?
I would just say that, you know, turning to the holistic methods of health and talking to someone has really, truly been, I think, a time-tested and beautiful way of healing. And it empowers us to take healing into our own hands as opposed to just throwing our hands up and saying, you know, give me a pill and hopefully I'll be okay. That in and of itself is not a very secure mode of healing, because we just feel like we're being tossed around, and that stunts our healing. So I encourage everyone to seek out, even though it's much harder to heal holistically, I think the healing happens at a much deeper level.
Oh, Yes, absolutely. You can't take a pill for this, people.
Yeah, there is no
Right?
pill.
There's a
There's a machine now that someone created that stimulates the vagus nerve, that has good results for like rheumatoid arthritis and chronic inflammatory diseases. But that's great, but we should also learn to do it without the machine, because we can't just sit around and rely on a machine. Otherwise, we never feel secure in ourselves.
Absolutely. There was one thing I heard. Tell me how true this is. Okay, when you gargle, it stimulates the vagus nerve.
Yeah, gargling does, singing, dancing, laughing, making eye contact with someone who's smiling authentically, kind words, watching people play, splashing your face with cold water. All those things stimulate the vagus nerve.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Yeah, people need to start laughing more. I know.
Yeah, it would help. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this was fantastic. I love this conversation. Victor, thank you so much for sharing this with us and making us more aware of an aspect that we can, first try to identify if we're having any of these symptoms, and then knowing that it's really in our hands, that we can heal some of these things. And of course, when it comes to relationships, you may need some help there with a relationship coach or counselor. But when it comes to diet, I mean, some people you have to really look at how you're eating, how often you're, consuming alcohol or sugar and things that are really not healthy for you. And people can change it, though it's not that easy, but it's doable.
It is definitely doable. I see it happen all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of my patients change their diet and they get better.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens. It's not impossible, but certainly it may take some people longer than others. All right. Well,
yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yes.
Was there anything else we feel complete?
I feel complete. If you do.
Yes, I do, actually.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time.
You got it. No problem. Anytime.
I learned so much in this interview. And, learning about the vagus nerve, now some of the things that you can do to just help. Some of these things, like even as easy as like dancing and singing. I don't know about you, but ever since I have been working from home, I'm singing less, because I always used to sing while driving to work in the morning, or even when I'm away home. So I'm going to just be really conscious about that. Make sure I'm singing, make sure I'm dancing a little more, and just you don't have to spend hours doing it, right? Like 1 or 2 songs, not that big of a deal. So I think those would be easy for me. And so there's just, and laughing. I mean, maybe watching some comedy, or that's what I do actually. I'll watch something really funny on Netflix or something, or just talk to my girlfriends, and we always laugh all the time. But I hope you enjoyed this wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for listening. If you've been loving these episodes, I would love if you could leave a 5-star review and subscribe. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you all next week. Bye for now.